All right, welcome to I got to find my button here. The No Fucks Given podcast. I'm Ryan Perry with my co-host, good old, well, you're not that old, Will Cordonley. So
getting there,
getting there. You're starting to catch up to me in the grade department, though.
Yeah, working on it.
I
don't know where this came from, man, but here we go. We'll see how it spreads over time.
Yes. And you can't the haircut you can't really tell, but I've got a few bits of gray in my head also.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I'm starting to get that too. I have to say, I'm mourning, we'll have a great show, but I will be mourning the loss of the mohawk that was kind of precious in my heart.
Hey, who knows? It might all come back. So there's hope. Who knows? Today I've already forgotten what we're going to talk about here. How about why we repeat painful habits? It's those repeating habits, and it seems, and I think everybody knows, we all live in patterns at this point. And if you're not aware of that, kind of think back through your life when you get a chance of the patterns that seem to show up. But I think the key part of all this, Will, for me, is the painful side. It's not, we don't repeat happy patterns necessarily. Some people do. But I don't know if we pay attention to those as much as the painful patterns. Why can't we just change painful patterns that happen in our life?
Yeah. We don't seem to, the painful patterns, the ones that seem to happen completely automatically and through random circumstance, and just like, how do we keep finding ourselves with these people around us and in these situations?
Yeah,
those seem to repeat much more automatically and unconsciously than how do I keep winning the lottery, or how do I keep doing amazing things in my life?
Right.
We can grow into that, and we can become that, and we can consciously work to be that way in our lives. But it doesn't seem to be these deeply held, and as we'll get into it, kind of precious but extremely painful patterns that get built into us.
Right, definitely.
Usually from a very young age.
Yeah. And the fun part about that whole young age part is that they become these invisible beliefs that we don't even know that they're there. So it's kind of like having blinders on, and you can only see this, and yet there's all of this also going on in the world. And I think that shows up a lot of times when your friends come to you and you're like, hey, you got to stop doing this. And you're like, what am I doing? Because you're just not aware of it, because it's just the way that you see yourself. It's the way you see life. So there's so much that goes into this. And to kind of give people a little bit of context, I think it probably makes sense to start with kind of the way the brain works as far as safety patterning goes, the way the critter brain works as far as protecting us, because that's what's generating all of these patterns, is essentially the very deep recesses of the brain trying to protect you.
Yeah. Well, it gets complicated, and we'll have to source it all out. But yeah, it's we have layers of our consciousness and dimensions of our mind, and as we talk a lot about on this podcast, the critter brain, it gets not only is it closest to the spinal cord and all that, but it usually gets primacy over everything because it's tasked with survival, keeping the heart beating, keeping respiration going. And the problem is it doesn't really do anything else. It doesn't sort for our happiness or our well-being or our contentment or
doesn't
anything.
Even care.
It has a black and white binary view of life. We're either alive or we're dead. And if we're alive, it's like 10 out
Success.
of 10. Fuck yes,
Right. And it's
all
interesting.
That matters.
Yeah, and I like the word binary because it's very black and white. There's no like, well, we might. It's 100%. It's either all in or all out at this point. And it shows up in so many subtle ways, which is the interesting thing. And what I like about the way the brain works is that it's very simple. And yet the way everything gets integrated is what makes it complex. But if we try and just strip it back and keep it very simple, and for you, the audience, if this is the first time you're hearing it, is just understand that there is that core base level that Will was talking about. Think of like when you turn a computer on, there's that initial boot sequence. That's like the base layer of programming that everything else fits on top of. Nothing goes through the rest of the programming until it goes through the survival, protection, critter brain part that has a very black and white view of the world. Survivability. Yep. And it's even if it's 99.9% sure it'll survive, if you still have that 0.01%, it's like, sorry, not interested.
Yeah, no good.
Yeah.
And when it works kind of on its own, it works really well. Where it gets complicated is everything that makes us incredible and beautiful and powerful as human beings, our conscious thinking minds. Mm-hmm. When these two start crossing with each other, that's where it gets hard.
Right.
The antelope that gets away from the lion, it doesn't have any considerations about that afterwards. It just survived. And then sometimes they do a little shaking to kind of reorient the nervous system, but it doesn't think about that again. It doesn't have anxiety at night about it. It doesn't get PTSD from that experience. It just binary, threat, get away, threat gone. Okay,
eat, drink.
Yeah, yeah,
eat.
Exactly. Procreate.
Must find mate. Yeah. How simple life must be for them at that point. And I think it's also important, and I just lost what I was going to say, is that so safety first, but then also kind of understanding the way the brain works in the sense that we form our own beliefs and realities. So kind of what you touched on, that often from an early age, there's these habits already entrenched. I think science is still out on it. I look at it within the first 3 years. Some people might say that everything's kind of that core view of yourself and the world is kind of set in concrete by the age of 3. Some people might say 4 or 5, and some people might even go earlier than 2. I like to use 3, and these are again kind of that core understanding of who you are. These are the core foundational beliefs about how I view myself, how I view the world, are kind of set in stone by the age of 3. It doesn't mean they're not malleable. It doesn't mean other beliefs, other realities can come in and play with that, but kind of that core programming like the critter brain has, that's kind of set by the age of 3. So as we become adults, we don't know any better because we've always lived this experience.
Yeah. And the thing is, once those are set, everything that comes after it gets layered on top of it, but the foundation is still there. And what gets layered on top of it, or what is allowed to be experienced or known as real about ourselves or about the world or about other people, comes through those filters of these things that are already set anywhere between, where the sperm hits the egg and, maybe as late as 6, but, really around 3, like you were saying.
Right.
So it kind of, I like to think of, there's lots of movies and shows about it. The Simpsons movie pops in my head the easiest, where they drop that crystal dome over Springfield. These beliefs kind of operate like that, where you have this invisible shield that you can actually get out of, and it actually sets the context of what you can and can't do. That's how these core beliefs tend to operate in our lives.
Right. Very interesting. So if we kind of take the premise that we have this not pre-program, but we've got this base level program built into the critter brain for survivability. And survivability, by the way, we're not just talking about physical life and death, which is super important, but we're talking about emotional survivability. Can I emotionally survive this? Yes or no? And the other wrinkle we have to kind of add in on this is that the brain is always going to be attracted, the critter brain specifically, is always going to be attracted to what it has survived because it knows that it's survivable. And that's where those patterns come from, right? So if I know X behavior is survivable or X experience is survivable, would it make sense for the critter brain then to keep on trying to reenact that ability to survive?
Yep, totally. And we start to have this incredibly frustrating, although beautiful experience at the same time, that what is the difference between our experience of our life and our beliefs? Because we have a belief, and then that belief manufactures automatically experiences that confirm that belief. And then we have experiences that reinforce that belief, and we
Right.
kind of loop around
Right.
over and over and over again. And this is where we find ourselves, the classic example, on our way to our fourth, abusive alcoholic marriage, and we just don't know why, and we can't stop ourselves,
Right.
even though we kind of know it's not good for us, but it's
Right.
deeply compelling too.
Yeah, and they were such a good person originally. When I first met them in the bar, they were this great person, and I thought this time was going to be the winner, and yet, hold it, what's going on? And there's that logical side that's frustrated, who knows they want more, and because they don't understand the emotional side and what the critter brain's trying to do, there's actually what we call an IPO. There's an intended positive outcome. And that IPO in that case is, but this is a survivable experience because you've been living it your entire life. One of the examples that really made sense to me, it's kind of an extreme example, and I don't recommend doing this, but if you had a child and you hit that child in the head with a hammer every single day, and I'm not talking about hard, but enough that it felt it, it would not be a positive experience, ideally for anybody, the person doing the hitting and the child that's receiving the hitting. But if you did it every single day, go ahead.
Actually, for the person doing the hitting in the moment, it is a positive experience, as weird as that sounds.
Right. Yeah, it's the best option available to them. Yeah. But you take that child as they grow, they don't have a voice as an infant, as a little one. They don't really have a voice, and so they get whacked in the head, and they don't have a way of protecting themselves. As they get older and they individuate from their parents and they start having a voice, they're going to be like, hey, you need to stop doing that. It doesn't feel good. And so parent says, okay, or whoever the authority figure is says, okay, we're going to stop doing it. You're right. You're grown. That child, their critter brain is going to start freaking out because it knows every day I get whacked in the head and I survived this experience. It's now a part of my life. If I don't have this experience on a regular basis, how does the critter brain that works in a very binary black and white fashion know that it's going to survive?
Yeah, not getting hit every day is a variable. It's not black and white. It's an unknown.
Right. Well, the fact that I haven't been hit, right? You're saying is becomes the variable. Logically, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Obviously, if you're not hit in the head, you'll survive. Totally makes sense. But for that individual who's had this experience every single day, critter brain don't know. And if the critter brain don't know, it starts freaking out. And then miraculously, that individual is going to start running into things. Even though they're only 5'2", they're going to find like low hanging shelves or whatever. And now it's like, why do I keep on hitting my head on stuff? This is so weird. It's that unconscious behavior that's going on that Will was talking about earlier, where these patterns repeat, is based on survivability. And it's really that crazy.
Yeah. And the kind of old joke about that, metaphorical story, I would assume, hopefully.
As far as I know, although I've heard some really crappy stories from people, unfortunately.
That is certainly accurate. The old joke is, all of a sudden out of nowhere, you blow out of that situation because it's, wrong, and you stand up for yourself and you get out of there. And then some time passes, and all of a sudden you don't know why, and you don't even remember how you got there, but you start hanging out in front of hardware stores looking for playmates, looking, and you're like, what, you're just there. You're compelled to. It just
Right.
happened automatically and unconsciously, and you're looking
Right.
for who's gonna play this pattern out with me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So the likelihood of that individual finding somebody who's very physical in their life, may it be a friend, may it be somebody that they end up having a relationship with, or the type of activities that they engage in, might be conducive to, physically getting hit on a regular basis. And for them, that feels good. And sometimes they may be compelled to say, well, while I enjoy this, my body's getting kind of beat up. And I don't want the physicalness of it, but it just feels good to be in that environment. So then the question becomes, okay, well, how do we shift now that we've noticed a pattern? How do we actually shift that pattern? And I think one is, and we kind of talked about this last week, is through observation. Is we have to observe and notice what's going on first, right, in order to recognize the pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely a big part of it, and a big part of it is just what you said too. And this is a tough one for people. And when I work with people and this is happening, I kind of have to calibrate and see if this will be useful to say it as directly as we'll just say it now.
Mhm.
But these painful, unconscious, repeating experiences that we keep having, they come with good feelings. They're usually deeply unconscious.
Right.
We're usually like, what the fuck is going on? This again? And like, I
Right.
hate this, and whatever it is. But deeply, deep down in the kind of more powerful drivers of what causes our behavior, the experience is associated with good feelings. And that's weird and counterintuitive and kind of bizarre, but it's just how it works. And because that's true, it puts us in the driver's seat of our lives. Denying it or getting angry about it is understandable, but it doesn't reach for the most empowered version of yourself at the end of the day. So that's kind of where I sit with it.
Yeah, and I think you kind of stepped on something that's really important, in the sense that there's this conscious awareness of how you're feeling and the frustration, and people get anxious, they get mad, they get frustrated. And I forget, frustration is a combination of not being able to make a decision or something, and anger. Do you recall that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
not off the top of my head.
So consciously you're feeling a certain way because you recognize that emotionally, I want change. I'm tired of this behavior, this pattern. And it goes both ways. There are things that I'm doing that I don't want to do, and there's things that I'm not doing that I do want to do, that people get emotionally frustrated by. And just realize there's this other part of your mind. So we have kind of the prefrontal that's kind of making all the rational decisions and thoughts and ideas. But then we have the unconscious, the critter brain part of the mind that's also at work. And while I would say most people think that they're consciously making decisions, we have to take the precept that the unconscious is really making the decisions for us. It's driving the feelings in the body, and based on those feelings, we consciously think we're making the decisions that we want.
Yeah.
And we know that's not true.
Totally. I saw somewhere years ago a picture somewhere on the internet that really drove it home for me. And I don't know if it comes from some tradition or if it's classical, but it's a picture of a boy sitting on an elephant, and they labeled over the boy as conscious mind, and then labeled on the elephant as the unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that really sums up to me how it works. It's like, who's in control there? Really?
Right. And some might argue if the boy is manipulating the elephant, isn't he in control then?
This is the goal of being a fully expressed, actualized, individuated adult. This is the entire goal of this podcast and our work with people and for ourselves, is to actually be controlling the elephant,
Right.
making choices, and our unconscious mind just says yes more time than it doesn't.
Right.
That's the absolute goal here, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
So yeah, in an ideal world, yes, the boy is driving the elephant, and the elephant is doing exactly what the commands are.
Right.
It just doesn't seem to work that way for most people.
Right.
Until we get some traction on this, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think there has to be understanding, because if the boy doesn't understand the elephant's role, then how can the boy control the elephant or have any management of the elephant? So I think kind of, what's important, and hopefully what we're getting across, is that there's these, at a very basic level here, if you think of the mind in two different ways, there is this programming that's autonomous, that is, it's keeping you alive. It's things that are checking for weird noises. It's checking, it's using all your senses to make sure, is everything okay? If it gets too cold, it lets you know by letting you know that you feel cold. Oh, maybe I should put a jacket on. You hear a scary noise, and the look and see to protect yourself, to identify if it's truly a threat. That's all working automatically. And over the years, it has generalized so much information so that when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to worry about, is there a threat outdoor? And hopefully you don't live in a situation, I know some people may, where do I need to listen to the footsteps coming down the hall to know if I'm safe or not? Some people live in that type of environment. But it's generalizing all of this all the time. And once that generalization kind of gets set, it has created this view of the world that you now get to experience. Because my reality of this conversation is based on the way my mind is interpreting things, based on the way it's generalized and interpreted my whole life experience, versus Will's experience of this conversation is based on the way his system is generalizing and making decisions about that, but it's all happening automatically. So as the boy on the elephant, you got to understand there is this part of you that is working in conjunction, but really kind of independently, that is doing all of this threat assessment, and it's trying to find ways that you can survive based on the ways that you've survived in the past. And we can't survive happiness, unfortunately, folks. Maybe Will can. I can't. I don't know.
Learning to bear and survive happiness is actually a big part of everything we're talking about too. And that phrase took me years to fully understand, because that sounds so stupid and so counterintuitive. But if you grew up in an environment that was abusive or invalidating or full of loss and pain and grief and all kinds of stuff, even if you grew up in an environment that was subtle, like it was just kind of like, we don't have emotions around here, so you didn't learn how to regulate yourself, and you didn't learn that emotions were okay and survivable, then all of a sudden you're probably more used to the feelings of sadness and despair and, hating yourself and these kind of things. That's survivable. That's
Right.
normal. That confirms our reality. We have this bias inside ourselves to want to make our beliefs true, or else we feel kind of crazy. That's part of the difficult part of this too. And if you didn't grow up in an environment where feeling ecstatically happy and fulfilled and expressed and mirrored back to you when you accomplish things, and had that be a positive thing instead of a negative thing, your system's just not used to it. Mm-hmm. So it actually comes with low level or high level threat in a way that comes with, and this is where I say it gets a bit complicated. If all this stuff comes online when we're kids, if you shine too brightly, right, as an example, and you get disowned by your parents, you're going to die because your parents feed you and your
Right.
parents take care of you, and you can't do it for yourself. And this is why belonging and is such an important part of everything. And this is where we talk about, well, if it wasn't okay to be this way then, and you're trying to be this way now, and you're finding that it's really hard, or it makes you terrified or anxious, or you stop, or you start something and you just stop, for the last 10 years basically, you're fighting yourself in a way, because you're bumping up against threat, you're bumping up against retroactive death, which of course we
Right.
know sitting here consciously can't possibly happen, but in
Right.
your mind it doesn't matter, it feels real, it
Yeah.
feels deadly real.
Yeah.
So
Could you kind of talk about that a little bit more? I think for people that maybe this is the first time they've heard the term retroactive death,
yeah.
kind of let that integrate a little bit with your mind and kind of go, huh? Because I can imagine watching it if, 10 years ago, if I had heard that, my head would have gone sideways and went, huh? So
Yeah,
retroactive death,
yeah,
what is
great
that?
point. Retroactive death would be anything related to when these patterns come online. I'm trying to think of a good example, so I'll just keep talking until something comes up, unless you want to chime in. But the idea being, when we learn
Well,
something about ourselves, like, oh, when I when I reach for my needs being met, I'm met with threat or invalidation. I
right.
cry out as a kid because I'm hungry. It's a need. I genuinely need this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's either met with hostility or frustration on the mother or the father's part, because they're just too busy or too overwhelmed, or they're just are barely getting through life in their own system, in their own ways,
Right.
day by day. And then we start to need that. Wow, me needing something really kind of gets everyone pissed off, and it makes it worse for me here. So,
Right.
oh shit, I know what I'll do. I will go through the rest of my life not having needs. I just won't need anything. It's so
Right.
simple. I eat, and then there's no problem. Then the
Yep.
environment will be okay if I'm this way.
For you
And then
chameleons, out there, we're talking to you, the people that can kind of adapt, which is a powerful
yeah,
tool, because you're talking about me at this point. I am the chameleon. I can adapt to all different types of things because my needs are not, I've learned to suppress my needs and my wants. And so I can
okay.
adapt to a lot of different situations very easily. And yet you put the spotlight on me and go, okay, Ryan, what is it that you want?
Oh,
Oh,
you're like, whoa, wasn't
this,
expecting to feel so confronted here
yep,
today. You know,
yep. But it's awkward and it feels uncomfortable,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
because
yet,
you're fighting retroactive death on an
right,
unconscious level.
right. And it's like, you can logically say, but hey, Ryan, if somebody reached out to you and said they needed your help, would you help them? Obviously. Would you hold it against them? No, as long as they're not being stupid. If they like legitimately need help, I'm going to help them and it makes me feel good. And yet the flip side is, then why aren't you as an individual willing to accept other people's help or even raise your hand and reach for help? Well, because it doesn't feel good. Well,
Yeah.
why is that? And yeah, so you kind of have to step into that. I think another great example is that a child is guilty who does not steal in a family of thieves.
Yeah.
And a lot of, I know when I first heard that, I'm like, how can a child be guilty who does not steal? Oh, because they live in a family of thieves. And if you're not part of the thievery, then you don't belong. You talked about belonging earlier. And it's such an emotional drive that and it happens unconsciously. It's always there for that child to say, oh, I'm going to become a police officer as an example. they're committing suicide by family, essentially emotional suicide by family.
Yeah, and retroactive death too,
Yeah.
to a certain degree. You'll be, if you don't steal, you'll be cast out, and if you
Right.
cast out, you'll die. You
Yeah.
know, if you're young enough, it's just it's black and white. It's pretty
Right.
simple
Yeah.
for the critter brain.
Yep.
And
And
they
it
understand these things.
and it doesn't mean that you cannot have that child who decides who doesn't want to steal. It doesn't mean they can't have a great relationship with their family. They may have a crappy one also, but even if they have a good working relationship with their family, that emotional despair that I'm separating from my family is death. Doesn't matter if the child's 20, 10, 30, 40, unless, until they resolve it. If you don't resolve that aspect of what's going on and reframe it, it's always going to live in the system, and it's always going to unconsciously affect the filters that your mind is bringing into your conscious awareness on a daily basis.
Yeah, there's almost not a more powerful driver than belonging in humanity. You can see it play out in political parties. I think a really, really, really just clear example of this is how cults operate, especially ones that turn deadly. That's all belonging stuff too. People come into cults with family issues and belonging issues and all kinds of suppressed issues and things going on, and then they hook into an environment that convinces them that they can't survive without it.
Right.
And then they do, and then they can be controlled. Is a simple way to describe it. It's more complex.
Yeah, and I forget there is who is it that goes out and they have to talk to people on it? They always knocking on the Jehovah Witness. I've heard, haven't been in and not a part of, so I'm not speaking from an expert level, but part of the reason why they have Jehovah's Witness go out into the public and knock on doors is so that they will be denied and people will, go away, leave me alone. What are you doing? Go, all of these types of things. So when they come back in to the church, they can share their experience, and now the church can go, but here you belong. This is why the outside is bad, and you've experienced it, right? You went out, you knocked on the door, you had the door slam in your face, you had somebody yell at you, leave me alone, whatever that experience is. You come back in and you kind of get that little hug. This is where you belong.
Yeah.
And what a powerful tool to go, oh, okay, this is safety, and out there, outside of the group, is not safety.
Yeah.
Very powerful tool. And that's used consistently across all groups. This is not just one group.
That's some powerful dark side magic, man.
The dark side. Well, I think even Carl McKite, who's one of our teachers, goes, there would be no war without belonging, right? If belonging wasn't so strong, there wouldn't be war, because people are willing to die.
Yeah. I think Napoleon said, I've learned a great truth or a great fact or something, that men are willing to die for ribbons. And that shook me to my, I read that years ago, and that shook me to my core, because it's so true. And so it's so dumb. Although the meaning that you tie into a ribbon or whatever tribe you want to belong to is so powerful, or it can be.
The honor, the respect, the dedication. Yeah. I mean, those are all
amongst peers you care about.
Right. Those are all deep belonging traits, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
So, man, crazy.
So let me ask you this, Will. We've talked about a lot of dark side stuff. We talked a little bit about the way the brain works and just kind of understanding that there is an aspect of you that has a very black and white, it's either yes or no view of the world. And if it's 99.9% sure that you will not emotionally or physically die, it's still going to say no, because there's that 0.1% or 0.01% possibility, assuming there's a knowing, right? We have to have a known survivable option here. If we have two
Yeah.
unknowns, then it's going to pick the least of the two, if you will.
Mhm.
So what do we do? I mean, what is beyond one having awareness, and hopefully through this conversation today, people can start kind of evaluating the patterns in their life, start recognizing that, oh, there are some patterns here that I'm either not doing or would like to do. Now that I have awareness of it, like what can I do next, if anything?
Yeah, big question. Oh,
Or we
it's
just
tough. There's a
do we
lot of
just
things that
hang
can
our
work.
head and go, fuck, I can't change. This is just who I am.
You know what? Actually, oddly enough, for some people, that would actually really help a lot. As long as you don't stay there. If you've been trying super hard to make something change and it doesn't, actually yielding to that reality that this is how it is right now, and fully just be like taking a breath and be like, okay, like this is what is, this is what has been, this is what's going on, and not resisting it, not pushing against it, not doing anything other than just like, you know, if a wave's coming at you in the ocean, just letting the wave come through you, so to speak. Being in that space usually will open up the energetic channels for the next thing to come to you. It'll be a thought, or it'll be an experience, or it'll be something else. And I realize that's pretty non-specific, right? I can't. How do you know when you fully yielded to your life? That's a tough question. It's like when you've been hanging on a cliff and you're just so tired that you just let go, and you notice that there was a net below you that you didn't even know was there. It's that kind of, so it's a leap of faith experience. But
or your feet were just an inch off the ground and you didn't realize it.
Yeah. It's usually like that. So we say it a lot here, and I really, really, really mean it. It's not just self-serving, since this is what you and I do professionally, but you got to get out. Like, I truly, truly believe, and if no one takes anything else away from what I say on any of these shows, it's this. I think everyone should be in therapy, so to speak. It doesn't have to be traditional psychotherapy, although that's totally fine. But everyone on the planet can and will benefit from sitting with someone who is trained in what they do, is good at it, and gives a shit about their client's best outcome. That is the most powerful thing anyone can do about this. And if you think you don't need it, or it doesn't work, or you have some other invalidating thought about it, you really need it in that case. If your mind's like tricking you into thinking that this isn't an absolute truth, then you really should take a look at it. So that would be the biggest thing I could say. If you don't have the money or the time or whatever, or it's like, all right, do that. And here's some other stuff you can do other than yielding fully to life, which is kind of a esoteric, kind of spiritual way of looking at it, but it's very powerful if you know how to do it in your life and use it as a tool. Getting incredibly clear about the life that you want to have happen. It's like, take yourself out to your deathbed, like go like have a thought experiment. Go imagine like you dying on your deathbed. What do you want that experience to like? Who do you want to be there? What do you want to look back on your life and say you accomplished and got done or didn't get done? When you look back on your life, what are you going to like die with deep regret about that you didn't do, whatever that is? And once you get really like, so this is kind of an exercise that puts pressure on the system to really get, it's like, all right, this is what I really want. And then all these patterns in the way start bubbling to the surface. And that makes it a little more, it loosens up things a little bit more to clear these things or get conscious about it. You can try doing some reality testing, like, all right, this is what keeps happening for me. Is it what I want? No. Is this the truest form of who I am? No. And just asking yourself, we've spent this whole time talking kind of about how facts and logic and rationality aren't all that powerful, even though they feel like the most powerful things on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But you can use them a bit as a tool and see if that has an effect. Like, you do some reality testing about stuff.
Right.
Asking your tribe, getting outside help from friends. It's like the kind of classic example is person who's dating the same abusive jerk that they date every time, and they just don't see it, and all their friends are like, tearing their hair out.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you?
How
like,
do you not
you don't
notice
see how this is exactly like the last loser?
Right.
That kind of.
The fact that he just got out of prison yesterday is not a red flag at all.
Yeah. You're like, no, he's just really sweet. So you just don't know him like I do. That kind of thing.
Yeah, love that one.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would throw out there is there's the story of the guy, I think I've told it before, who he hit rock bottom living on the streets. I think he was fortunate enough to have a car in the LA area. And he realized that every decision he made in life got him to the place that he was at. And he didn't like where he was at because he was at rock bottom. So he goes, I must be making the wrong decisions. So he chose to make the opposite decision. If he wanted to turn right, he went left. And if he wanted to say yes, he would say no. If he wanted to say no, he would say yes. And it was scary because we're working against that creature system that is designed to keep you safe. And when I say that creature system, it's kind of like if you went to the tallest cliff ever and stepped up to the cliff, at some point people are going to get nervous. Some people could step right up to it. Other people might be 5 feet back and they're like, I'm close enough. We're talking about that level of fear, because if you get to the edge of the cliff and you fall off in real life, you are physically going to die. Every time you want to make a decision that's the opposite of what your mind says, even though it's what you want, you're asking that unconscious, that critter brain, that core rationality, it's not even rationality, that core programming to literally jump off a cliff knowing that it's going to die. And that's fact, because again, it's very black and white. And when it survives, it's like, oh, I was not expecting that. However, okay, super scary. Let's not do it again. And so just by him doing the opposite of what felt right, he was breaking down those barriers of safety and protection, that false filter that he was living in. Very difficult. Don't recommend it. That's why working with people who understand how the mind works can help you navigate this much easier. But he was able to break the cycle. And of course, these are the people that end up on TV and talk shows and all that, because they're the ones we root for. They were the underdogs. They did it. They give us hope. But just like our New Year's resolutions, that hope kind of disappears after a couple of days for a lot of people.
Yeah, and fighting yourself is exhausting. Can you imagine the lack of trust you have in yourself to know that you have to do the opposite of everything that feels right to you? Good on them for doing it, but that's a tough way to go. Better to work on your mindset and kind of some soul level family work and have internal alignment, instead of having to push yourself and fight yourself and grind against yourself at every single turn, which is what is kind of what's popular these days. That's really more in the zeitgeist, is grinding it out and working hard and fighting yourself. Because the people who do it and it works for them, which is more of the exception than the rule, then go tell everyone else to do it usually.
Right. Even though a lot of times they're not really happy.
Yeah. Well, how do you know when someone's truly happy? That's a difficult one.
Right.
Because they probably don't know either most of the time.
Yeah. So I think getting kind of it's all basic stuff. While it's easier said than done. When I say basic stuff, is having a clear understanding of what you want and then what is the next best step that you can take, or what's the next best available step that you can take, or the smallest step that you can take towards moving towards what you want.
Mhm.
But if you're not clear on what you want, that's where that first step needs to be very clear on what you want, because then you know what you're moving towards.
Yeah, you have to be super clear about what you want. That's the absolute first step. And it's kind of a tired trope. Yeah, I mean, I see it a lot because I just a lot in the entrepreneurial world, but it's true. So, the idea that you have to get out of your comfort zone and everything you want is on the other side of fear, that kind of idea, it's
Mm-hmm.
still true. And I don't like it because it kind of gets written on Hallmark, or it's like it invalidates people's experiences. They're like, well, they share something like, well, all you have to do is just push through it and stop
Right.
being a pussy. But if you kind of listen to what we've said in this episode, you might have a deeper understanding of when you have fear about something that's not truly threatening, that is critter brain at work, that is what
Mm-hmm.
they call ego, or that is what your patterns at work. So doing it, even though it feels scary, can change things.
All right.
And it might shift stuff. So some people it will not, but it can work too. So
All right. Yeah.
if you're terrified to
Especially,
start that business, try starting it. That might actually cascade you into some traction and momentum.
right. Yeah. And I was going to say also is that, especially if you've been working on self mental wellness for some time, it's interesting how, um, kind of like Tetris, if you just get one piece to fall in, all the other pieces kind of fall in. So a lot of times you might reading books, you could be talking with people, you could be doing different programs or whatnot. And a year goes by and you're like, yeah, I've kind of made some progress, but I feel like I should be somewhere else, a little bit
Mhm.
farther advanced. And it's just that one thing gets said, or you have that one experience. And when you do that, everything just kind of goes chunk, 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 chunk. All that training, all of that learning, all of that education, it just kind of goes chunk, 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 chunk. And it's like you have this epiphany, and it's like, oh my gosh, that was great. But if you didn't invest in yourself early on, or if you don't start investing in yourself now moving forward as you want to, you'll that option doesn't become an option. You've removed the option off the
Mhm.
table at that point. So
Yeah, totally. And investing in yourself, I personally believe that specifically working with people who know how to revise limiting beliefs and know how
yeah.
to change and revise limiting parts of our identity about ourselves is it's the best investment you can make in your
Right.
life. And I really mean that. Like, it throws off value, to just use the investment metaphor. It throws off value for the rest of your life in ways you
Mm-hmm.
could never even comprehend, in terms of happiness and external wealth, if that's what you care about. And why wouldn't you? We all need money.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Um, Relationship happiness. Because if you go through life and you have these goals, but you deeply just feel like you're the lowest, like dirtiest piece of shit, worm on the planet, like deep inside, you wouldn't even use those words, but that's the experience of yourself.
Right.
You can't have anything that you want, because every time you reach for what you want, your identity goes, wait a minute, we can't have this, because
Right.
people who really hate themselves don't have good things, they don't have good
Right.
emotions, they don't have positive experiences of themselves that come from having success or having a win or having momentum in their lives. And our identity is always seeking to be coherent with itself, so we sabotage ourselves,
Right.
or we outsource it to someone else, or we blame a group of people. It's why I don't have what I want,
Right.
because our identity is just trying to be coherent. So we have to work on ourselves at a belief and identity level and upgrade that, and things unfold naturally from that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
I
the
have a
same way that we unconsciously recreate these deeply painful patterns, when we upgrade this stuff, when we upgrade our software, we start to unconsciously create more positive things. maybe not naturally, but we start to make more choices about what we want.
Right.
We learn that being human, kind of the main game is just making choices about what we want and then allowing our subconscious to bring that to us. And when you get these cobwebs out of the way, so to speak, it just comes faster and cleaner over time. And then as it gets better, as Abraham Hicks puts it. I really like that phrase.
Right. And better
as this cascading thing.
Yeah, better in the sense that your future version of you, your worst day is actually above the best day than your past version. And that's kind of that cascading that you're talking about, is that, oh, I didn't even know I could have this bad of a day feel good, because it's so much better than my best days from years ago. What a great experience that would be for everyone.
Having better quality problems. That's what you're after.
There you go. Better quality problems. I like that.
My life is so good that I agonize over, am I going to vacation in the south of France, or am I going to take a yacht tour around Greece? Like, this is a very, very agonizing and painful choice for me.
Why not do both? Why not do both?
There you go.
Well, you deserve it. You deserve it.
But that's whatever. You don't have to want those things, but that's the goal, right? We want better quality problems. Life's designed, our minds are problem solving machines. Life's designed to have inbuilt impetuses to move us forward, so that will always be there. You're never going to be pain free, so to speak, but the pain can be much, much, much better and much less invalidating and harmful to your psyche and to your body.
Right. Yeah. Very, very good stuff. I think with that, I feel like we've covered a lot in today's show. I'm curious what people's questions are, if we've confused you in any way, or if you have questions on anything, we'd love to hear them in the comments below.
Yeah, we have, today's episode's a lot to chew on. That's how I'll put it. These are huge concepts and very counterintuitive, and took Ryan and I years to understand and process and chew on and kind of figure out for ourselves. So if this all sounds really crazy, you're not crazy. That's understandable. But this is some of the most powerful stuff in terms of living the life that you want. This is like a cornerstone of this, in my opinion. So listen to this over and over again until it makes sense. Even if that takes years, it's worth it.
Right. Totally. And I think it's a topic that we'll be digging into. Maybe, we can chunk it down and talk in more details. In fact, next week.
Or people can ask us questions about it, and that makes it even easier for you and I.
Yeah, there you go. We could make a show maybe out of one of the questions. But speaking of shows, next week we have make lasting positive changes today. Don't put off tomorrow what you could do today. Make positive changes today.
Yeah, would you?
Would you?
When it gets better for you, it gets better for the rest of us. So quit putting it off,
Yes, for sure. Alrighty, sir. That's all I got, unless you got something else you'd like to include.
I don't think so. This was a fun one, Ryan.
Yeah,
Thank you as always.
Thank you.
Mr. Co-pilot.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to crank the music up a little bit. I got to bid you adieu. Everybody, until next Tuesday, we'll see you at 10:15. Take care.
All right. Be well, everyone.